And I would like to express particular gratitude to our agents in Kiev, Beirut, Bamako, Ouagadougou, Port-au-Prince, Port Vila, and Caracas, and everywhere where it was necessary every day in recent months to show courage in action and also to serve the country was particularly dangerous. This courage is needed in the din of the world. Indeed, given all this disorder, it must be said, 25 years later, we are waking up in a world, and I would even say simply, 10 years later, or what seemed unthinkable is happening. A disorder born from the weakening of international rules, contested by other powers which no longer play the game, deploy without complex in new spaces of international confrontations, and try to fragment the world to their advantage. 10 years ago, and I salute here the mobilization of French diplomacy and minister who led it at the time, we conclude a historic agreement, the Paris Agreements for the Climate. Who could imagine it today? Solidarity investment from 2018 to 2022, our solidarity investments have increased by 50%. Over the same period, we created 48 alliances françaises, bringing their number to 835, when, by reducing their network, they gave up their ambition. Over the same period, 100 to 50,000 additional pupils were welcomed in schools in the French education network. They are now 600,000. Which country can say the same? Over the same period, we gave ourselves the means of our influence in the Cité du Développement that we are building in Paris, or in the Maison des Mondes Africains, whose foundations we are laying in 2025. During these 10 years, we have carried out the fight against terrorism with remarkable work, which has been done by all the services, the DJs, the DG, the police and gendarmerie services, our magistrates to counter the threat, ensure the safety of our fellow citizens. And we have adapted both our legislative arsenal, our organization, and our means by reinvesting massively there too. But it is a fight that we have also carried outside our borders, in a very logical way, in the Levant as in the Sahel. And in other regions of the world where terrorist groups are organizing, continue extreme vigilance, the mobilization of our network, the organization of our security services, and from the Horn of Africa to the Gulf of Guinea via Khorasan and other regions, we know that the influence of terrorist groups continues to prosper. In short, the threat is not behind us. It's even the opposite. And our role, your role, is to continue to see it in mind, to act, to protect our compatriots through this vigilance, this work of understanding, and also the pursuit of useful alliances to fight against these groups. And it is in this agenda of prosperity and these new partnerships that I want to mention the African continent. And I do it there too with great gratitude for all the work you do and clarity. First, we have an agenda that must somehow get out of the obsessions of the past. I have made every effort, and I will continue to do so, to look at historical, cultural, and memorial issues. I believe that we have done it with great sincerity in recent years, and the unprecedented work that has been done on Algeria with the Stora Commission, including the speech that was given at one point by the Minister for Senegal to the policy of restitution of works of art, in accordance with the Ouagadougou agenda that I had mentioned. In recent years, we have profoundly changed this software. That is to say, that France looks at its past in its entirety. Who are the imperialists of today? And therefore, this kind of combination of false intellectuals manipulating social networks, using the disarray of a youth and the interests of Russia or others in Africa. Let's be lucid, but let's not give in. And therefore, in this context, no, France is not in decline in Africa. It is simply lucid. It is reorganizing itself. I say that because when I read a good part of our press and a lot of comments, people looking at it with the struggles of yesterday say, "It's terrible, Africa. We are disappearing." No, we chose to move in Africa. We chose to move because we had to move. We looked at our past, memorial, cultural relationship, We update it, we assume it, we tell ourselves the truth, but we give in. Nothing to disinformation, to interference. 2, we had a security relationship. It was of two natures. In truth, there is a part. It was our commitment against terrorism since 2013. We were right. I think we forgot to say thank you. It's okay. It will come with time. In gratitude, I am well placed to know it. It is a non-communicable disease in humans. But I say it for all African rulers who did not have the courage to wear it in front of their public opinion. None of them would be today with a sovereign country if the French army had not been deployed in this region. And I have a moved thought for our soldiers, who sometimes gave their lives and fought for years. We did well. We left because there were coups, because we were there at the request of sovereign states which had asked France to come. From the moment there were coups d'etat, where people said our priority is no longer the fight against terrorism, it's this or that. Whatever. The France no longer had its place there, because we are not the auxiliaries of putschists. So we left, and then we decided that. This is the second part of reorganizing our military presence. Why? Because we had a kind of remanence, and we ourselves nourished a post-colonial discourse. Because in French-speaking African countries there was this history, and therefore we had let a presence settle in our bases. Did they still have a justification? Is that what the influence of France was? All those who served, it was no longer there, and it was no longer understood. It was used. That is to say, all the networks of activists that I mentioned came to say, look at the French. They have a camp with 2,000 soldiers there. So they prepared a coup, and all possible disinformation was used against us. So we patiently, and I thank Jean-Marie Bockel, I thank him in two capacities, personal and for this mission, because he is one of those who lived in his flesh, and the flesh of his family, what I mentioned earlier. But he patiently carried out this mission, in conjunction with the ministers and the CEMA. And so we proposed to the African heads of state to reorganize our presence. Since we are very polite, we left them the primacy of the announcement. And make no mistake, it is we who have it. And sometimes it was necessary to push, but does not want, because we are polite, correct, and that we are reorganizing ourselves, that it should be turned against us by saying they are driven out of Africa. You have to tell yourself that in many of these countries, we did not want to remove the French army or even reorganize it, but we assumed it together. This is the partnership. And so, yes, we are in the process of opening a new security and defense partnership where we will have strategic bases. Djibouti is one of them, which is why it is of a completely different nature. I mentioned it in front of our soldiers. It will be sustainable, stable, because it is regional. And we will ask our partners to know how to express their needs in terms of defense. But we will do more training, more equipment, more intelligence, more defense contracts also in the long term. We are going to qualify the threat with them, and we are also going to invent a new relationship, as we have done in recent years with Benin. A new relationship, as we are going to do with Nigeria. We started a strategic dialogue that did not exist until then, which was an aberration, etc. Strategic defense partnership, uninhibited but forward-looking. And beyond that, the African continent is a continent of growth. And on that, we are too cautious. And I also say it because, when I read about the press, French glasses are obsessed with French-speaking Africa. We must look at French-speaking Africa with pride. We have interests there. We have dear friendships with leaders, in civil society and elsewhere. But hey, we did well to make the first big trip from Nigeria to France for 25 years. A few weeks ago, 25 years, it's only one country. There are 250 million inhabitants. Well done to go on the first visit to Kenya. I had not stopped returning to Ethiopia for the second time. More than 100 million inhabitants to have consolidated an energy and investment strategy with South Africa. Our glasses on Africa are no longer the right ones. When we talk about Africa, it is a continent where there are major emerging players. There are tremendous growth potentials, and we are sometimes divesting, and therefore we must regain daring, rethink our funding. And on this, we must, at the interministerial level, rethink our financing to take more risks and support more risks, rethink our European rules, so that we have the capacity to finance our major players and have a strategy with our entrepreneurs, all sectors combined, much more ambitious towards the African continent, and seen as a continent of opportunities. On the commercial and economic question, on the food and agricultural question, on the question of innovation in all fields, on the artistic and cultural question, on the sporting question, which are also areas where we have expertise, or we have shown them to the whole world, in particular with the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and where there is a whole export strategy that we must deploy because all the French players who have worked for our games, we want them to go to work for the African Cup of Nations and other major competitions, and that this is, in doing so, a policy that comes in support of what we are doing in education and others. And so I trust you so that this software that we started to change in Ouagadougou is each time re-explained, carried, assumed as conquest software, like all transitions. It's difficult because there are nostalgics, because there are people who don't understand or who don't want to understand, and because we are shaking up vested interest. But believe me, it's a good thing because the world is changing and we need to embrace this new partnership.